Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. For the last 6 years since the Islamic Republic of Iran stopped adhering to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, which is a reference to the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran, following the American withdrawal from the deal, the IAEA, or International Atomic Energy Agency, has been blocked from fully monitoring the Iranian nuclear program and verifying that the fissile material it has been enriching and accumulating is not set aside for military purposes. Tehran may have intended it for tactical leverage and renew negotiations on a nuclear deal, but the fact that it is steadily approaching the threshold for almost a dozen warheads is nevertheless cause for a real concern. The latest IAEA report sounds the alarm about this high-quality, high-quantity material, as well as the continued evasion regarding undeclared military sites, which have been used for clandestine work. So where do we go from here as the Trump administration continues to talk with the delegation of the Islamic Republic, headed by the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi? Joining us to dissect this matter includes from New York City, Dr. Olli Heinonen, formerly served as the Deputy Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, currently a Distinguished Fellow at Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. Also joining us is Mr. Marshall Billingsley, who formerly served as an Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Tariff Financing, as well as the Assistant Secretary General for NATO, and very relevant for today's discussion, he was President Donald Trump's negotiator on nuclear matters in the previous administration as the Undersecretary of State. It's great to see you, Marshall. Last but not least, Mr. Amir Oren, our TV7 editor-at-large. And Amir, when we're talking about the complex situation of Iran's nuclear aspirations, its race towards a nuclear weapon, we've been deliberating this topic, of course, for many years now. Nevertheless, this is a pressing challenge with a nearing timetable to potentially seeing the Islamic Republic achieve what we all fear.
So, Jonathan, you're familiar with the expression, perhaps a cliche, a fork in the road. A fork is usually composed of 3 teeth, sometimes 4. But you can see the 3 tracks, the 3 directions in which events are now unfolding. Iran, on the ground, is enriching more and more. The potential for Iranian nuclear weapons is getting more and more realistic, more and more dangerous, short of a decision to go nuclear, according to the US intelligence agencies. This is one track. The second track is the Israeli preparation for a strike against these facilities if there is an assessment in Jerusalem that Israel can no longer take the risk of waking up one day to find out that Iran has gone nuclear militarily. And the third track, the third tooth, is the American preference for negotiations in order to roll back the Iranian progress, with the caveat that if these talks fail, the US will reluctantly, as a last resort, choose to go the military route.
And the fourth track is, of course, the Austrian report, which has stated that the Iranians have already made the decision and are racing towards a nuclear weapon. Dr. Heinonen, the International Atomic Energy Agency has published a couple of very damning reports of the Islamic Republic's conduct. Naturally, those reports do not necessarily provide the full image of the severity in which the Iranians are currently engaged in. What can you tell us about that?
Thank you. These are good questions, and we have to carefully think what they mean. Certainly, Iran uses them as a threat, so that's for sure. But are they going to take further steps? I think this is the question. And let's look just one number, and this is the inventory of 60% enriched uranium, which Iran has been amassing since 2023, gradually. When you look those past IAEA reports and the numbers which are now out, it clearly indicates that Iran is focusing to produce 60% enriched uranium, not 20% enriched uranium, which is a typical fuel for research reactors, which Iran also has. Not anything above 60, we see. 60 is basically used in naval propulsion and nuclear weapons, about 80%, 90% onwards. So what is the use of 60% then? I have gone very hard on the history of nuclear energy, and there is no real application on civilian domain of possessing hundreds of kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. So this has another purpose and other message. And as we know, it's can be very quickly converted to weapons grade material in a matter of few days, 1 week. If they have a small cascade hidden somewhere, they can produce enough material for one nuclear weapon, and it takes another month actually to assemble the weapon, provided that they have done what Mr. Saleh has said in public, that it's like a car manufacturing of car. They have all the parts except maybe one essential part of the car on the shelf. And then when they get that essential part for the car, they can assemble the car. Iran could have done the same thing with the nuclear weapons. It can have those on shelves somewhere. One doesn't need to wait for months to assemble a weapon. It could have been even tested in one of those places where they have done explosive tests, which are often called also, if done in a bigger scale, cold tests. And I want to remind people about 1980s and 1990s. Pakistan had 25 such locations where it did cold tests before it made the actual nuclear test in 1998. When they made those tests for 5 weapons, they knew that they are going to work.
Very interesting indeed, and very alarming that Mr. Billingsley, you were President Trump's nuclear negotiator when you served as Undersecretary of State. And it seems like the current team is, on the one hand, very tight-lipped about the ongoing talks behind closed doors, but nonetheless, President Trump comes out and says every time, zero enrichment. But it seems like there is a certain speculation about whether or not there is a true will to enforce that, with a lot of skepticism about Iran's capacity to accept zero enrichment in the first place, as they keep also uttering out into the public domain.
Well, Jonathan, I think there's a lot of confusion right now in Washington and a high degree of concern within Republican foreign policy circles over exactly what is the plan here in these negotiations. I recall that during the first Trump administration, we had a bunch of people with no nuclear weapons experience and no experience with the Iranians, who basically spent a year and a half delaying the president from withdrawing from the JCPOA. We now have a new crew with the same lack of experience that are trying to get us back into an Obama-style deal. But luckily, the president doesn't seem to be falling for it. His tweet last night made clear zero enrichment. That's the right position to take. Any other position that allows Iran to retain an enrichment capability puts us right back down the same path that we've already traveled. We know the Iranians cheat. We know that they have nuclear weapons ambitions. You know, to Oli's point, the latest IAEA report calls out a couple of additional very, very concerning facts. One is that at some of these undeclared sites, they were actually testing the hemispherical implosion device that they would use for the weapon. At another site, we know they were working on the nuclear trigger, the neutron-driven trigger. Something not in the IAEA report, but which has been in the media, is that when the Israelis conducted the most recent round of strikes, one of the facilities they struck is actually where a secret team of engineers and scientists was working on the high explosives to drive the nuclear weapon. So these are very, very concerning facts and trends. I agree with Oli completely. There's no legitimate reason for them to be pursuing 60% HEU. I think actually they could fabricate enough uranium metal for a bomb in less than a week. And they could probably, according to David Albright, have as many as 7 within 3 weeks. So we are right at the brink of nuclear breakout by Iran. And I hope that the president's negotiating team really buckles down and insists on a zero enrichment strategy.
Dr. Heinonen, before I actually ask you about the quantity of nuclear weapons, I will point out that on the 26th of October, when Israel last year launched its attack against Iran's various surface-to-air capabilities and other targets, it did indeed target the Palchin nuclear installation on the outer skirts of that installation. There was such a site, as Mr. Billingsley just mentioned, and what's interesting to note is, because it's a secret nuclear site, quote unquote, the Iranians were unwilling to condemn Israel for it, since they didn't want to confess to their wrongdoing in this context. So it's quite ironic. There is a double-edged sword there. But nonetheless, Dr. Heinonen, I'm very curious about the arsenal of 7, because the arsenal of 7 nuclear payloads would be within the context of a 25 kiloton per payload. And there is another school of thought that you follow, which is between the 16 to 20 kilotons payload. Is that correct?
Well, there are a lot of numbers out there, but let's be realistic. We see and we know what are the missiles Iran has. They can carry actually quite heavy loads, several hundred kilograms, some of them even up to the ton. So the payload is such as perhaps not the question. I'm more interested on their doctrine. Let's assume that they do this. What would they target? To reach mainland US is still, I think, beyond their current capabilities. But they probably will use them for tactical nuclear weapons, and there you need much less material. You need also less testing of the re-entry vehicle, because the speeds are much less. They have a variety of missiles, more modern cruise missiles, which can carry such a few hundred kilogram nuclear weapon. It could be just maybe 10 kilotons, 20 kilotons. For example, if one targets some military, goes after some military targets, or gives warning shots to the other party. So we have such a spectrum of choices here. And I think that most important is to concentrate. Do they have the capability? And if they don't have it as of today, how long it will take to make it? And here we come to another thing, which we also in the IAEA cautioned in 2003. Iran has distributed its manufacturing capabilities all over the country. Just as a simple example, we were monitoring at that point of time, you find it from the IAEA reports 2003 and 4, more than 10 sites which were manufacturing vital components for gas centrifuges. I assume that they have not brought them to one single place. That happens still. And same is with the weapon components, high explosives. There are some information about in public where they manufacture HMX, less known perhaps RNDX, and more advanced high explosives. But those are also distributed, and they are not big factories. So there are a lot of uncertainties, and if someone wants to eliminate all this by military action, it's not a one-day operation, it's not two-day operation, it's probably not even 1 week operation.
Well, Professor Niels Bohr, a nuclear scientist, of course, that taught, among others, Dr. Oppenheimer, he stated quite clearly his deep concern over the implications of the production of nuclear weapons that he highlighted would create a new international order altogether. When we're talking about Iran possessing a nuclear weapon, where will the nuclear non-proliferation treaty be, considering the arms race that this will trigger, undoubtedly, not only in the Middle East, but around the world? Mr. Billingsley?
Well, I think it's vital that we preserve the NPT. It is very much in both U.S. interest as well as that of our allies, and frankly, in the interest of the world, to have the norms established by the NPT. But Iran is clearly in violation of the NPT. And with the findings that the IAEA has now issued, it's high time for the board to find Iran in noncompliance and to refer the matter to the National Security to the UN Security Council. Of course, I expect the Russians and the Chinese to step in and block anything meaningful there, but it is important that we insist on compliance with the NPT. Let me be very clear that Iran likes to assert that they have some treaty-bound right to enrichment, and they don't. There is nothing in the NPT that gives Iran the right to enrich uranium. And I think it's very, very important that people understand that. To Oli's point, yes, I mean, I think conducting military strikes to eliminate all the centrifuge production facilities will take time and will be distributed far better if we were able to negotiate an agreement that called for the destruction of those sites, the destruction of all of the centrifuges, the removal of all enriched uranium, both low and high, from Iran, and the insistence that Iran finally abide by the IAEA, the NPT's additional protocol, which allows the IAEA to conduct anytime, any place inspections, something the Obama administration gave up under the JCPOA when Iran promptly declared that there were 20 plus military sites that were off limits to international inspection. So the path to a negotiated outcome is available, but it's not at all clear that the Iranians will agree. And at that point, I think it's essential that we be prepared to move forward with the state of Israel in striking the program.
Mr. Olin?
I have a layman's question to the experts regarding the test. Now, of course, the Iranians may want to publicize the test for political purposes, but on the other hand, they may try to hide and disguise it. And the question is, Iran has been known to have suffered many earthquakes. Is it possible, if they have their own experts and they know in advance, a few hours in advance, that an earthquake is about to take place, can they then conduct a test which they will hide within this earthquake?
Dr. Heinonen?
Well, I think that this is a little bit beyond my understanding, but what I understand from the capabilities of the CTPTO, they have several tools, first of all. One is just to see the seismic things over there, but they can also then, if there is a leakage of radionuclides, they can find out fission products which tell about that it has been an explosion. Until now, CTPTO has a couple of times they have disclosed the earthquakes which have taken place in Iran, and most of the time they have put the depth so low in from the surface of the earth that most likely is not a nuclear test. So I think it's a possibility, but I think that they need to do very controlled tests, and they need to know where the test is done. It takes time to drill those holes, put the instrumentation. So I don't find that the earthquake is perhaps the best way to conceal it, but everything is possible. And I remind about this Pakistan thing, 25 locations, they moved all the time to various locations. They did those tests, and we have to remember that all those 5 nuclear devices, I think it was 5 in 1998, they worked. And what was disturbing in them, one was a miniaturized. So there were bigger ones, but there was one smaller one, the one which was blown up on the second day of the tests. So this shows that if you have a starting point, which Iran has for the weapon design, you can achieve a lot with cold tests, and you still have some risks there that maybe things don't work the way you may want it. But I think we should take it very seriously, the option that they have the design which might work if they plan to manufacture it.
I would agree with Oli on much of that. The design that they appear to have is fairly simplistic. So we're not talking about a highly elaborate design, which in turn means that the testing requirements could be quite minimal. The United States is not party to the CTBT that Dr. Heinonen mentioned because, among many other things, it's an unverifiable treaty. For instance, the radionuclide sampling that he mentioned, well, Iran chose to put their site in the middle of downtown Tehran, which makes it completely useless for that purpose. There are seismic differences between the shearing that happens during an earthquake versus what the seismic signature of a nuclear detonation looks like. But there are a number of known evasion techniques, including, for instance, decoupled nuclear testing in some places like a salt cavity, which could potentially make detection of the test pretty hard. So I don't think we can rest on confidence that we would necessarily know when they had assembled a device or even perhaps tested one. Moreover, if they are going to build one device, I suspect they'll build quite a few.
Mr. Billingsley, I'd like to ask you specifically also on one of the points that were raised by a report of Axios, where they claim that as part of the so-called arrangement or the outline for a deal that was delivered to the Iranians via the Omanis, highlighted the option of temporary enrichment under 3.67% until a point in which a certain consortium would be established. What does that actually mean in layman's terms? And when we're talking about this temporary period, wouldn't 3.67% enrichment, with all of the various cascades at Iran's disposal, I think David Albright highlighted that it would bring about enrichment times 5 from when the JCPOA was reached?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, 3.67% is 70% of the way to the bomb. So letting Iran have any enrichment whatsoever would be a colossal mistake. It goes right back down the Obama JCPOA path, and it provides a supply chain and a set of industrial activities surrounding the enrichment process that Iran can use to once again mask their clandestine efforts to then further pursue and to further break out yet again. So zero enrichment, as the president has said repeatedly, and as Secretary of State Rubio has said repeatedly, is the answer. It's kind of distressing that such a proposal appears, or at least was claimed to have been made, to allow interim enrichment of low-enriched uranium. And by David's own calculations, the current proposal would appear to actually be worse than the original JCPOA by giving Iran the ability to produce between 2 and 6 times as much low-enriched uranium as during the first 10 years of that prior agreement. So this is an issue. One other point that I think we should not lose track of, this agreement, if it's reached, really also needs to include ballistic missiles and Iran's support for terrorism. These are matters that are equally unacceptable and should be addressed in the form of a comprehensive arrangement, particularly if we're going to then turn around and start removing sanctions on the Iranian regime. We cannot agree that they plow all of that newfound cash right back into their terror apparatus, right back into their ballistic missile program. Those activities need to stop as well.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. The last time, immediately after the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was agreed upon, subsequently also ratified by UN Security Council Resolution 2231, excuse me, we saw that the then Foreign Minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, traveling around the region saying, whoever joins us in the fight against, Israel, against America, we will support you, and all that money started flooding. You were, of course, Mr. Billingsley, in charge of the maximum pressure campaign during the previous administration. That was unfortunately done too late in that transition period that, as you mentioned, there were some people at the beginning that didn't really understand or didn't want to deal with, rather, the consequences of the JCPOA. But Dr. Heinonen, we don't have very much time left, and I'd like each of you to have 1 minute to conclude your messaging or statement or analysis for today We'll start with you, Dr. Heinonen.
Thank you. This is an important fork on the road, but I'm afraid that there will be other forks down on the road. And for me, actually, negotiations have yet even started. This is warming up. People are painting their red lines, but we don't know exactly what has been happening on those meeting rooms. There are scoops here, scoops there, but let's see when we get facts. And I think that the next real fact will be the IAEA board resolution next week. It will be there on Wednesday or Thursday. We will see then what is the next step.
Mr. Billingsley?
I think Oli's right, and my hope is that the Trump administration doesn't pull a Biden, and that we actually support a resolution moving forward at the Board of Governors this time around, regardless of how uncomfortable it may make the Iranian proliferators feel. A couple of real quickly on this regional consortium idea that you asked about, Jonathan. It's not workable. It's been tried many times, and it's completely superfluous. It's unnecessary. There are half a dozen countries that can provide reactor fuel to the Iranians should they have a legitimate need for it. That includes the Urenco consortium. It includes several other countries like Russia and China. So there's no need for a regional consortium. It's really a red herring, and we should move off of that idea. But I would urge that time is of the essence. Not only is Iran hovering on the doorstep, but they're also stalling. This idea of indirect negotiations. They're refusing to sit down directly with the United States to negotiate for two reasons. One is it draws things out. It makes it a lot longer. You don't get as much done in a negotiation when people have to shuttle between conference rooms. And two, it gives them deniability that they can always claim that their messages were misunderstood or misinterpreted. So we need to get to direct negotiations. That's what the president insisted on initially, and we really should insist on that now.
Dr. Oli Heinonen, Mr. Marshall Billingsley, thank you so very much for all of your insights. We do need to mention also, Mr. Owen, of course, snapback expires on October 18th. Europe, or the E3 rather, Germany, Britain, and France have just July and August during the U.S.
But
Security
also
Council presidency.
2231. Also, that resolution
Absolutely.
Which you mentioned,
Absolutely. So
that expires too.
There is much to still be focused and deliberated, but this will have to wait for our next edition. From here in Jerusalem, wishing you all a good day.